Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Free with David Aragona. This is the preview segment of Derby Watch. It's the final weekend of the major prep races in California, New York, and Kentucky. 100 points to the winners of those three stakes races that we are going to be talking about. Many of the contenders in the three races, I'm referring to the Santa Anita Derby, the Bluegrass, and the Wood Memorial. Several of the top contenders are already virtually assured a berth in the Kentucky Derby via their points total. But David, there are several that are desperate for points, including some that we're going to see in the Santa Anita Derby, and that's going to be the first race that we talk about. Let's talk about the Santa Anita Derby and the horses that really need to show up in order to make their way into the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, Practical Move definitely leads that list of probables and contenders for the Santa Anita Derby, but he's also the horse that doesn't need the points in the race. You do have horses on this list like Go Rocket Ride, Skinner, and National Treasure, all of whom figure to take some money in the Santa Anita Derby, who need top four finishes, or in some cases top three or top two finishes to secure spots in the Kentucky Derby. And obviously, National Treasure would be the one that really needs to finish in the exacta if he's going to have a chance of getting the points that it looks like you're going to need to secure a spot in the Kentucky Derby starting gate. Arguably, Skinner needs a third place finish. So it's going to be interesting to see how the math works out coming out of this race.
Yeah, it looks like as of right now, going into the weekend, it's probably going to take right about 40 points to get into the Kentucky Derby. That will be adjusted after this weekend. And Go Rocket Ride and Skinner, they need to finish third or better to bank 30 points and lift them above that 40-point threshold. National Treasure, with no points to his name so far, as you said, he has to hit the exacta. David, I believe that you have watched some of the workouts that XBTV has shown with regards to National Treasure. Have you been as impressed as I have with what you've seen in the morning on tape from National Treasure?
Yes. So I know this horse has always been a good workhorse. I mean, if you've watched his prior workouts, even going into the Sham, he always seems to do well in the morning, but it seems like he is really thriving coming into the Santa Anita Derby. I saw in that most recent workout that Tim Yakteen added a shadow roll to him, which I kind of understand because he can be one of those high-headed horses, and the shadow roll can sometimes get them to run a little bit straighter and stretch out. So I really like what I'm seeing coming into this race. It's going to be interesting to see how he stacks up against this group that has a little more recency than he does. He certainly is playing catch up, but I'm not going to be surprised when he stacks up with this field and arguably turns out to be the best horse in this race.
Well, we should have known already because he was scheduled to run March 4th in the San Felipe. He scratched with a bruised foot, but he has come back to train very, very well, National Treasure, and I expect him to show up and run his race on Saturday. Whether that's good enough to defeat Practical Move, Go Rocket Ride, and Skinner remains to be seen. I still like Skinner a lot. John Sheriff's is known as a conservative trainer. Whether that's accurate or not is another discussion. But he has hammered on Skinner since his most recent start. I believe he'll go into the Santa Anita Derby as the only starter who has worked 4 times since the San Felipe. 2 of them were in company with overmatched workmates, and Skinner took care of business. And then his 5/8 workout last weekend was super. It was a solo workout. It was 59-1. It was the 4th fastest of 84 at the distance. Skinner is coming into the Santa Anita Derby and into spring at the top of his game. Look, I admit I've been a fan of Skinner since last summer. What I have seen so far this winter and spring suggests that maybe he is a better colt than many realize at this point. We'll find out for sure on Saturday. Practical Move, he's in the Derby. He runs on Saturday in the Santa Anita Derby. Go Rocket Ride, Skinner, and National Treasure. They're all up against it on points. Let's go ahead and watch a replay of the San Felipe just to remind everyone how good the likely favorite for the Santa Anita Derby is. That's Practical Move. And David, he was impressive in his first start as a 3-year-old.
He certainly was. He got a 100 buyer in this race, beat some pretty nice horses, some of which he'll face again in the Santa Anita Derby. And Brad, I know when you asked me a couple weeks ago who I thought the most underrated horse on Derby Watch was, and I threw his name out because it just feels like a lot of people aren't viewing him as a legitimate Derby contender for some reason. Maybe it's because he's sired by Practical Joke, who does get a lot of sprinter miler types, but he certainly looked like he handled the distance pretty well in that replay. And he's only going a 16th of a mile farther here. So I expect Practical practical move to be pretty formidable on Saturday.
Yeah, he will be. He's likely to be the favorite in the Santa Anita Derby. That's race number 6 on Saturday at Santa Anita, right smack in the middle of the card. Okay, there's a big race also at Aqueduct. It's the Wood Memorial, and the favorite in this race is Hit Show. Let's take a look at some of the principles that we expect to see in the lineup for the Wood Memorial. And every horse that we expect to see in the entry box needs points to get into the Kentucky Derby. There's 2 on Derby Watch, Hit Show and Slip Mahoney, each with 20 points. They're going to have to finish, well, at least 4th or better. General Banker, nobody gives him any respect. He's actually the points leader among the Wood Memorial likely starters with 24 points. All he does is go out there every single time, pick up the pieces, and finish 3rd. 24 points he has. Arctic Arrogance and Dreamlike. David, a maiden in a grade 2 stakes race. What could Todd Pletcher possibly be thinking with regards to Dreamlike?
Well, Todd Pletcher is going to have 3 expected starters in this Wood Memorial when it's drawn a little bit later on Wednesday. And actually, 2 of the ones he's considering for this race are maidens, Dreamlike and Croupy, who finished up the track in the Louisiana Derby, but also was a maiden coming in there. Dreamlike feels like the one of that Pletcher trio that's going to take the most money. He's finished 2nd in both prior starts at Gulfstream, but he's earned buyers of 87 and 91. So that makes him the co-fastest horse coming into this race on the buyer scale, along with Hit Show, and he's bred to run all day, nice pedigree, so I could see Dreamlike attracting quite a bit of support in this race, and I won't be surprised when he runs well.
Well, I won't either. With a 91 buyer speed figure that matches the 91 that Hit Show earned in the Withers last time out, I kind of think that Slip Mahoney is a horse that does not get the respect that he deserves. But David, I think you have a little bit different opinion with regards to Slip Mahoney. I thought he ran okay in the Gotham. I know he got beat a country mile. He lost by 7 lengths. I thought he ran well enough to give a chance, stretching out to a distance he should love. He's by Arrogate out of an AP Indy mare. This is what he wants to do. Not sure how good he is. You have a different take on Slip Mahoney. You don't like him at all. Am I right?
I agree with your pedigree note. Added distance is supposed to work for this horse. I was a fan of his going into the Gotham, and I was just a little bit disappointed by his effort. He was very sluggish in the early stages of that race, was farther back than I expected him to be, and that race featured an extremely fast pace that fell apart, and I just thought he should have gotten closer to the winner at the end. So a little disappointed in that performance, but I do agree with what you're saying about him potentially getting better around 2 turns, and it's not like this is coming up as the toughest Wood Memorial that we've ever seen.
No, it's certainly not. I'm actually surprised that Arctic Arrogance is a horse that we're still discussing as a potential Kentucky Derby starter. I thought a couple months ago that they had basically concluded that he was, a 1-turn type horse, but here he is as a potential pace setter in the Wood Memorial. He has 16 points, and I guess if he finishes 3rd, he would probably qualify to run in the Kentucky Derby. That would give him 46 points, and we'll find out how far he can actually run. Before we talk a little bit about the Bluegrass at Keeneland, let's take a look at the replay of the Withers, and you're going to see Hit Show just make a mockery of this field, running past Arctic Arrogance in the lane, winning off by more than 5 lengths. This was in early February. His first start since then comes Saturday. David, I suspect that you're going to make Hit Show a relatively short price in what looks like a big, deep field in the Wood Memorial.
Yeah, I don't see any scenario where Hit Show is not the favorite in this race. Feels like a horse kind of like Angel of Empire, who's moving forward for the Brad Cox barn. Did get a perfect trip in that victory, and you could actually make the case that Arctic Arrogance ran a little bit better than his 2nd place finish might indicate, because there was a lot of speed that percolated on the front end in that race, and actually a few of the horses that were involved in that pace along with Arctic Arrogance have since come back to run very well after finishing up the track in that Wither, so maybe that's a reason to upgrade Arctic Arrogance a little bit, but Hit Show, definitely the one to beat.
He's definitely the one to beat in the Wood Memorial. In the Bluegrass Stakes on Saturday at Keeneland, this is a field that will include at least 3 horses that are currently listed on Derby Watch, including Tapatrice, Verifying, and Raise Cane. Let's take a look at the list of principals in the Bluegrass. Raise Cane and Tapit Trice with 54 points and 50 respectively. They are virtually assured a berth in the Kentucky Derby already. All they need to do is run well, come out of the race well, and move forward. They're in the Derby field most likely. A couple other horses on this list that need points include Verifying, Sun Thunder, Classic Car Wash, and Blazing Sevens. David, I want to talk briefly about Verifying. We talked about his effort last time out in the Rebel Stakes. He finished a better than looked fourth. I think you and I both agree that he had a tough trip. He ran better than the finish position suggests. But now we are, more than a month since they ran the Rebel, and the Rebel is starting to look like it's a kind of a negative key race. The winner confidence game, they're talking about either training into the Kentucky Derby or maybe prepping into Lexington. The 2, 3, 5 finishers from the Rebel Stakes, all disappointed and or regressed next time out. David, we liked Verifying's performance, but is it possible that we have overrated the strength of the Rebel Stakes?
Well, the point that I'll make about the Rebel is that the horses that we saw come back out of that race in the Arkansas Derby last weekend were all horses that were closing into the extremely fast pace that fell apart in the Rebel. So maybe in retrospect, they were just horses that were really with the flow of that race, as was the winner, Confidence Game, who looped the field on the outside. Whereas Verifying was a horse that was chasing that pace early, kind of got stuck in traffic down towards the inside when the two leaders were backing up at the top of the stretch. So Verifying ran a different kind of race than some of the runners that we saw come out of the Rebel last weekend. But I still think some of your concerns are fair, Brad, for a horse that feels like he could be the second choice in the Bluegrass this weekend.
Verifying is actually the 3-1 second choice on the morning line. The favorite in the Bluegrass is Tapit Trice, a horse who, he came from out of the clouds last time out to win the Tampa Bay Derby in a relatively slow final time. He earned an 88 Beyer speed figure. To me, the Bluegrass has upset written all over it. If Tapit Trice leaves himself too much to do coming from last, and if Verifying is not as good as the Rebel, the potential negative key race indicates, then maybe this race is kind of wide open. Raise Cane, he was dominant in the Gotham Stakes last time out. He had a perfect trip, and he has 54 points. Okay, Sun Thunder, Classic Car Wash, Blazing Sevens. Is there any reason at all for us to spend any time talking about Blazing Sevens? I respect the trainer. I respect this horse's 2-year-old form. I'm kind of surprised that he is in this field. David, what about Blazing Sevens, who's scheduled to add blinkers for the Bluegrass?
Yeah, Chad Brown seemed pretty convinced that he did not handle the track in the Fountain of Youth. Some horses don't like the kickback situation at Gulfstream, so maybe that was him. But, he just really never got out of a canter in that race. He was not competitive at all, so he has a lot to prove in here. Among the others, Brad, the one that I find a little interesting is Sun Thunder, because he's coming off a trip where he was very against the pace situation in the Louisiana Derby. He is wheeling back on just 2 weeks rest, though, so that's a question for him.
Yeah, he's coming back very quickly. It's an interesting move by trainer Ken McPeak. I'm going to take that as a positive sign. I think it means the horse is doing well. Maybe he just did not run all that hard in the Louisiana Derby, finishing 5th. He has 34 points. I guess all he has to do is really maybe finish in the top 5 to pass that 40-point, unofficial threshold to make the Kentucky Derby field. All right, let's take a quick look at the on the bubble horses. These are horses that could still possibly show up in the Kentucky Derby. Brave Emperor, he's the leader on the European road to the Kentucky Derby. Our Daily Racing Forum's correspondent, Steve Anderson, was able to reach the connections of Brave Emperor on late Wednesday morning. And as of Wednesday, his status for the Kentucky Derby is doubtful, which I think is kind of a smart decision. He's probably not good enough. At this point, it looks like he's not going to come. Wild on Ice. He exits the Sunland Derby. 50 points he earned winning that race. He earned a 77 Beyer speed figure. Probably not going to make the cut. Jace's Road, Disarm, and King Russell, 45, 40, and 40. All horses that still could make the list. They're horses that I don't really like, but I think we have to at least respect their points total. David, do you want anything to add to on the bubble list?
Yeah, as we've discussed who's in and out of our top 20 over the past few weeks, I think we both acknowledge that Jace's Road is likely to wind up in the Kentucky Derby starting gate. 45 points seems like it probably will be enough, and his connections have voiced intention to run in that race. But I know neither you or I were big fans of his performance in the Louisiana Derby, so we're taking the wait-and-see approach and giving some others a chance in the spotlight on the Derby top 20 to see what they do this weekend.
Disarm is a horse that we respect. He's moving the right way, but we have to see if he makes the cut. And King Russell, I don't know, it's just hard to make a case for him. Well, the final major points races are Saturday at Santa Anita, Keeneland, and Aqueduct. And next week, David and I will take a closer, precise look at the likely complexions of Kentucky Derby 2023. Until then, for David Aragona, I'm Brad Free. See you next week.